Hello, I'm Jack.
And I'm Martin.
And we are the Washboard Resonators. Welcome to our podcast, The Washboard Resonators Present. Conversations from behind the red curtain on vintage music and stories from the entertainment industry. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Washboard Resonators Presents, and today we've got a great drummer and friend of mine and a guy I've been having lessons with and still having lessons with, Paul Smith, and I've been looking forward to doing a conversation with him, Martin, because he's a great drummer, educator, author, teacher, and he's kind of worked at some of the highest levels around the world, done the Parkinson's show, for example. And he's had lessons from people like Joe Morello, Jim Chapin, and John Riley. He's like really world-class drummers. So I'm really excited to hear. I don't know a lot about his story. I know he's done some great stuff, but I'd like to know the details of how he got there and stuff. And I know he ended up in Wales for a little bit, ended up taking over from my drum teacher back in Wales, who we're going to do on a future episode. So I'm really excited to hear his kind of journey. And he's a northern boy, so you'll be glad to hear about that.
He sounds like, in lots of cases, our dream man. So this is fantastic, isn't it?
Exactly. So let's get into it. Paul Smith.
Woo!
So Paul Smith, welcome to the podcast. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
I'm delighted, absolutely very flattered to be asked.
So I met you 4 years ago, something like that now, I think. I think the first time was when I was trying to buy a cymbal off of eBay and I saw it was in Leeds, and I thought, I'll message this person and see if I can come and have a play before. And then when I came to your studio where you are right now, it was just a plethora of beautiful drums and cymbals, and you knew far more than me about cymbals. I was like, all right, I better listen to this guy.
Tom Sharp said, I'm working with Jack Amblin, and he's got lots and lots of gear. But what he didn't tell me just how much gear you really had. I mean, what a hoarder, my word. God.
I think you should see Martin. I think it depends how you judge it. We talk about it sometimes. Martin's got more guitars than I've got drum kits. But then if you separate the drums, from the kits, then they've all got more drums. Then.
Yeah, but what a unique combination you two make. I'm a big fan.
Exactly. So I wanted to, you've been on our list for a while to interview because I know a little bit about your backstory and the amazing career you've had, but I don't know the gaps. So I'd kind of like to fill them in, really. So can you take us right back to the beginning when you're from Leeds, right?
I was born in Beeston and Bismarck Place, which I hasten to add. The house is no longer there because I tried to locate it on SatNav, and I just ended up in the middle of somebody's garden where it had been previously.
Oh, that's a shame.
And I've worked my way up to Roundy. So it's not bad, is it?
You've really worked through the Leeds postcodes.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Martin. Well, the thing is, but over the years, I wanted to move down to London, and I wanted to move to Manchester. I lived in Home Firth, or actually Hepworth. Is that where you come from? Wow.
Hepworth is, but yeah, I mean, I would say my grandma, bless her, she was born in 1913. She's still with us. She always says she was from Home Firth, but she was really from Hepworth.
Oh, so amazing. I'd only been there. They said that you have to be there 30 years to qualify as a comer-inner.
You do. I think coronavirus has spoiled it, but I've been to the Hepworth Feast quite a lot, which is a wonderful experience.
Magical time. And absolutely. They never let you play with the Hepworth band. I was quite gutted. It was disgusting. But I think it was nepotism that blocked it. They were very, very cunning.
The whole brass band world in that part of the world, which is where I'm from, basically, which you talk about now, is it's a very closed-in little world and very particular through the communities. But it's, like all musical worlds.
Yes.
There's the plus sides and the minus sides. I'm sure we're going to find out more about yours now.
Right. Well, the thing was, when I was on the road and I was extremely busy and I'm comparatively successful, I would come back at 4 o'clock in the morning and I would drive down to Hepworth, and it was an absolutely magical place. I'll go on to explain how I kind of retired from being a globetrotter, as it were. and I found that Hepworth was not central enough, and I moved to Leeds. But it was a magical place, and I had 10 years there, and I owned a number of properties there. I did have money once, but now I'm just comfortable now. But I did have money at one point, and I had a number of properties there, and it was a great place to live, and I can't recommend it enough. Feel very blessed to have had a tenure of 10 years there and all that. But you know what it's like? You move away from there, and I moved to Leeds. Where did I get a gig? Home Firth. I've never had a gig in Home Firth whilst I lived there. Typical, isn't it? You know.
Well, can we go back, Paul? So when were you born, if you don't mind us asking?
1949, 1st of October. I'm a Libran, very indecisive, but very faithful, my wife says.
Well, that's good she says that, yeah. So, Paul, how did you start out? Did you start out on drums? Did you come from a musical family?
No, I didn't come from a musical family. My grandfather played dulcimer. My father said he wasn't Scottish, he was Glaswegian.
Oh, right.
And he spoke in a delightful Edinburgh accent when you met him, and you thought he was very well educated, until he'd had a few drams and it resorted into his Glaswegian accent. My parents eventually gave in to me wanting to do music, but fortunately my mother worked with a lot of musicians because she was in catering. She was a waitress, and she was always getting them sandwiches and cups of tea in the break. She was very charitable in that sense. So she said, what's the chances of my son making a living? And they all encouraged my mother to let me get a drum kit, and that's basically how it all started.
Oh, good. Did you know what kind of drew you to drums then?
I'm sorry?
What kind of drew you to drums?
I think I did the group thing with everybody. The Shadows was a very eminent band at the time. It was like pre the Beatles. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones came just after I'd started, and we were all great fans of Brian Bennett. And you get in a boys' gang, and I got in with a gang, and it was the chap that ran the gang was Ziggy Costain. What a delightful name, alias David Barraclough. And we formed a band called The Strangers.
But hang on, Paul, you said you were born in 49, but Shadows are late 50s. So how old are you now?
Well, I'd be about 11, 12.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and all that sort of thing. And then we all grouped together, and you all had nominated your instrument before you bought one. You all just play, he's a guitarist, he's this, nobody could play anything. And we gradually went into it. The Strangers went on to be quite a successful little street band. And I decided at that point that I wanted to do dance band. I think because my mother associated with dance band musicians, and she wanted me to go into that area, and they said it would be far more lucrative.
That's interesting. So this is at the age of 11, 12, did you say?
Yes.
You 12, think, I want to do dance band music. That's interesting.
That's right, absolutely.
And what kit did you have at this time?
I had a delightful kit. I had a Premier 14x4 Royal Ace snare drum. I had a cymbal, and I had a cymbal stand that I'd made in metalwork. Oh, and a music stand. That was the extent of my kit. And I remember going across the road, and I used to light the fire for this gentleman. And he said, you play your drums in my house. So I took them in the house. I didn't know what I was playing. I just made a lot of noise. Well, of course, the next door neighbour had never heard anything like it before anybody had any drum. So it went absolutely potty. So I kind of resorted back to using practice band after that. But it was the entertaining story because it was early days. All these instruments were new and the musicians were exciting and all that sort of thing, even though it was only in Holland Park.
So you had a practice pad at this point. So did you have a teacher at this point then?
Now, I practiced quite a lot myself, but self-taught. And then I got friendly with a gentleman called Brian Gibson. And it really was the hare and the tortoise, because Brian Gibson was a very bright chap. And he was a great player, great musician, great ears, left-handed player. And I often said to him, why do you set your kit up right-handed? He said, well, when the drum kit came, it had a picture of a right-handed drum kit, and he plays right-handed. And he was besotted by Brian Bennett, not Tony McMeehan. We're just that cusp there. And he kind of took everything down. And for some reason, he saw fit to teach me. And he was not impatient, but he made me study hard. And then he said, let's go and get lessons. So we went to Alex Sidebottom, who was the drum manager at Kitchens, and we paid 21 shillings for 6 lessons because they were 3 and 6 each. And we went down into the Kitchens record shop, which was around the corner, King Over Street. And we sat down with our Buddy Rich book and we began to learn to read, as did Kenny Clare, the same book that Kenny Clare learned to read with it. And everybody did in those days. You know.
So both of you were having lessons together?
Yes, but Brian was quite a staggering player. He was just a natural player. And the teacher gravitated very much towards Brian. But the point is, so Brian was in front of me and Brian would learn his things and then he would make sure I could play them by the following week. And I'd love it. He emigrated to America, did Brian, and I lost touch with him. And it's genuine sorrow. I'd just like to speak to him, just thank him for kind of shoving me along the road, you know.
Yeah, I can see that. Right, okay, so what happens next then?
So after that, we go to the lessons, we get through the book, and then we get introduced to some big band things that we weren't very good at. But again, Brian had an amazing ability to learn by ear, but didn't have an amazing ability to read. Around that time, we both decided we would emigrate, far too strong a word, but to London. Because it was paved with gold. It was going to be jobs for the boys. It was going to be absolutely fabulous. I admitted to say I hadn't quite really perfected the art of drumming at the time, but I was convinced that was the way forward.
Who has ever perfected the art of drumming?
Absolutely. So I went down to London, and I think I was nearly 16, and I moved in 27 Savanack Road. What a memory this boy's got. And we lived in a flat there, and we stayed there about 4 months, but I was an electric technician at that time, and so was Brian, and we were going to do that until we turned professional. So we did about 4 months down there, and of course it didn't work out. And Brian had a fling with a lady that went wrong on him, and he met another lady, and it was all complicated. Females always tend to complicate these things, as you can well imagine. And at 15 and 16, you're very serious when you break up with a young lady. So we did that, and I came back.
Hang on, sorry, Paul. So I need to go straight. So you've met this older man, your drum teacher. You've been able to go down to London.
He was only a year older than me.
Oh, sorry, I thought he was quite a lot older. Okay, that's
yeah.
Even so, that's just like I'm just impressed with your parents' tolerance, really. Letting you go you want to go to London.
They were glad to get rid of me. I mean, nothing. Yes, of course you can go to London. Of course you can. Here's the money,
And the cover was doing this electrician course, basically.
Yes, and I'd go down there.
And you were 15, so when was this, about 1964 or something like that?
Yes.
So really right at the very, very birth of that British rock and roll kind of thing, that rock thing, I should say.
Oh, absolutely.
So did you, when you were down there, did you get to go to any of the pubs and see any of the bands that are around or anything?
Absolutely. Yeah, we went to the Marquee Club an awful lot. We went to Ronnie Scott's Club. Yeah. I had a lovely story. I was playing at Ronnie Scott's Club. I have to set this up properly.
Please do.
With a great tenor player called Tubby Hayes. Lovely story. I'm building it up there. And I must have been about 16. I was on this course there, sort of thing. And we got up and played. And I got up and I went up and the number was in 6/4. Well, I couldn't play in 6/4 because I didn't realize it was like 3/4 twice. So I played it and it was just so Tubby Hayes turns around to me and he says, "Get off," and he says, "Let somebody up and play." And the drummer that got up to play after me was Bobby Worth. And I spoke to Bobby Worth. I said, "Bobby, do you remember?" I messaged him and he didn't remember actually. But Max Abrams had taught Bobby Worth at the time.
Wow.
And Bobby was a bit more, I think he's a little bit older than me and he's a bit more confident. And he knew that 6/4 was 2 bars of 3/4. So he held the chair.
Just fill those gaps in for listeners who might not know. So I know Max Abrams, famous British. Well, he was a band leader and a drummer, wasn't he? And he did.
Yes.
Did he do Max on Swing? Or was that? Yeah, he did, didn't he? The book.
Probably.
Or is that Max Abrams? I've got it out in front of me now. It might be Max Bacon. Can't remember. Anyway, so who? And I know the name Bobby Worth. Just explain who he is.
He played with Frankie Vaughan. He was just a great working young drummer at the time. But because Max Abrams, he just had the ability to understand the business. My teacher, Jeff Myers, my great teacher, Jeff Myers, studied with Max Abrams. And Max Abrams was the cutting edge person to go to in those days. Be that it was stylistically questionable, possibly, but nonetheless, he had some great results. And a very hard teacher, I'm led to believe, but nonetheless very successful.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking of Max Bacon. He was an earlier British drummer, but even so, I know that I know Max Abrams, a prolific teacher, and that could be a bit hard to get on with.
I was working in the West End, and I went into the Talk of the Town. And Bobby Worth's drums were there, but I didn't get a chance to see Bobby at the time because our show was on and then he wasn't on. So we didn't manage. So eventually I just messaged him.
Okay, so you're back in Leeds then?
So I came back into Leeds and then I applied for the army. I decided this is the way forward. Again, a lot of the musicians that my mother worked with in catering were ex-army people. So I went to the Army Information Officer's lecture. I said yes. So I sat the exam. Miraculously, I passed. Wasn't that splendid? Then failed the bloody medical. How embarrassing. So I couldn't do it. So this is me trying to get closer to music. I then went into Kitchens of Leeds. And my teacher was looking at a prospectus. Well, I didn't know what a prospectus was at the time. That was far too big a word for me. And in the prospectus, it said they have a peripatetic teacher. I didn't know what peripatetic meant. It's Socrates, isn't it? Teaching his academy, his garden of learning. And he was the first wandering philosopher. Yeah, just to say I've had an education since then.
Yeah, just Perry, isn't it?
Right. Okay. And he said that they had peripatetic teachers at the college and I could go part-time. I went to the Leeds College of Music, which then was called the Music Centre.
Yeah, so but because Enrique didn't
Bookery Street.
Someone famous started Leeds College of Music, right? Because it was like it was one of the first ones to offer a jazz course in the UK.
It was. Right? That didn't start till my second year. I was in the office when Joe Stones wanted to know what to call the college. At that time, it was called the Music Centre. But fortunately, what had happened was when they opened the first year, they had some problems with boundaries. So they only had 8 students. So in I walk, and I went up to this chap. I said, "Excuse me, are you the principal of the music college?" He says, "No." He says, "I'm the painting and decorator clerk of works." So I went into the next chap. I said, "Excuse me." I said, "Are you another clerk of works?" He said, "No, I'm the principal of the music college. I'm Joseph Stone."
Wow.
A greater man just exists on this planet.
Well, he has got a building named after him now, hasn't he? The halls are
and so it should. I'm sorry for people who have not had the pleasure of meeting such a great person. And he saw something in me. I think it was probably enthusiasm. And he questioned me something about it. He said, how many beats in 6/8? Well, of course, I said 6. And of course, he was thinking of a hemiola, 2 dotted crotchets. I didn't know a hemiola. That's another thing I didn't know then, a hemiola. So I said, I don't know. But he said, right, he said, we'll sort that. I then started at the music college, which was absolutely delightful. And I did 18 months. And by the end of the 18 months, I was convinced that I knew everything.
Oh. So Paul, sorry, are you having general music lessons now? Are you having drum kit lessons or a bit of everything?
I didn't do kit. I did piano, clarinet and percussion.
Oh, so you played clarinet as well, or did you just start playing clarinet?
Yeah, you couldn't play kit as a first instrument. It didn't exist.
No.
So technically, I was the first percussionist, and I was playing kit all the time. But Malcolm Woodward came in the second year with the jazz course, as I was on the straight course, and he was actually the first drummer there. and a very dear friend, Malcolm Woodward. I taught his son, Daniel Woodward, another excellent musician. And so from there, I went on to study for 18 months. And I just kind of wanted to get more into my drumming. But I had a great teacher called George Dean, who was a great percussionist, who really taught me to read and connect with the music, not be able to just read figures, but to connect to the music and to count. But I wanted to play drums, and Jeff Myers was the man for me, who incidentally became the principal percussion teacher after I left, or probably about 2 years after I left. So I left after 18 months, and then I went to study with Jeff Myers privately, and I started gigging. But you've got to remember, at that time, gigs were prolific. You were part-time if you only did 5 nights a week.
Yeah.
6 nights a week was full-time, and 7 nights was regular. And on the 7th night, you go, well, I'll have a night off once a week. You never did. You could never really afford it or live to what you earned. So then I started concentrating on the gig side. And it was absolutely delightful. So that's how I got to that point. But the great thing was, at that time, I just had the right ability for what was needed. I could read. I wasn't a particularly good player, but I could read. There were lots of drummers that were far better than me, but couldn't read for toffee. I could go in and do the cabaret, I could read the cabaret. Maybe not the swingiest of sets, but I read all the figures and I played everything at sight. And a strange story happened, because I was talking about Brian Gibson. We went into the Ace of Clubs together, and I was depping, and the drummer was off or something. And I went in, I just got the music, and I came out and I set it up, and I just played the show, and he just watched it from the wing. This was my great mentor. And he very kindly came up to me afterwards and said, Paul, he said, that was great. He said, I couldn't have done that. No, but he would have played it better had he been able to learn it. But he never learned to connect with his reading. And I think that's finally why he didn't make the grade as a musician. He just couldn't kind of find that link, even though he was so talented. And he was one of I know another chap that can do this as well. He could play Little B perfectly. Right, so he was a great exponent of that. Andy transcribed it. He wrote it down there. Not
great
quite
solo.
right. Eh?
It's a great solo.
Absolutely.
So do you find you just had a bit of an affiliation with reading then?
Yes, I found I've always had an affiliation with reading, but it's not necessarily the way to go forward. The way to go forward is to have a good ear and have good reading and find middle ground. Reading is only an aid to memory. A lot of musicians think that you're a better player because you can read. That's nonsense. I've met several players who are phenomenal, and they don't know the difference between a crotchet and a hatchet. You know, they're just natural players. That's musical. But it's, you know, people have got these kind of misguided concepts, and people who can't read or are poor readers tend to beat themselves up, which is a big mistake, you know. So
are you playing, you're doing the cabaret stuff, are you also playing, so you're doing kind of old fashioned stuff and modern stuff, you're doing a bit of everything?
Absolutely. I was doing a lot of I mean, you'd work in a nightclub and you'd work 10 till 2 6 days a week, probably 7 days a week, and you'd work 10 till 11:30, you'd be playing brushes. Then 11:30 till 12:30, you would play the cabaret. Oh, you picked your sticks up. And then 12:30 till 2, you did a combination of sticks and brushes, providing nobody complained. And if you were doing a theatre club or whatever, a bigger gig at the time, but these were nightclubs, cosy clubs, you know.
And these cabarets, were these just backing I don't know if you call them stars, depending how big the club was?
Absolutely.
Anyone that came in.
Yes,
I love that. I wish I'd have the opportunity to do that sort of thing. That's the kind of thing I love going back to that.
Paul,
yes.
Like, are there any names that you can tell us that you backed at this point then?
They're all dead.
Well, I'm sure.
Yes,
and also any of the venues that at the time.
I've worked all the venues. I did Batley Variety Club. I did
cool. Well, Louis Armstrong, please.
Yeah, I did my first week's pro work there. Well, I thought I was the best thing since sliced bread. You know, he was great. And I was partly variety girl playing with Red Price, you know, on tenor saxophone. And Tony Servey was the MD. I was stepping for Ken Newton, who was the drummer. And that was great. I did the Fiesta Club Sheffield. That was another theatre club. I did Wakefield Theatre Club. I did it for 18 months. I think Ronnie Bosomley did it for about 11 years, and then I did it 18 months after Ronnie. But we all did these things, and it was, as Bert Gaunt used to call it was called musical chairs. And you'd play, you know, one week you'd have Harry Seacombe, the next week you'd have whoever the local star was that was coming round. I did, one of my favourite acts to work with was Vera Lynn, which was the most moving act that I've ever played. Land of Hope and Glory was her playoff, and she brought tears into it. Was fantastic. And when I worked with Bert Gaunt, because I worked with Bert Gaunt, we did Calendar for 2 years, TV. And Bert Gaunt was a star.
What's that, Paul? What's Calendar?
Calendar is Yorkshire TV. It's like
it's a local news program.
Yeah, and
they had a live band.
Yeah, they'd have one. Yeah, we'd play for somebody, and they booked us because we always got it in one. We always got it in one because we never made it difficult. It was always recorded in one. But it was run by Bert Gaunt, who incidentally did the second commercial on Yorkshire television, which was Bachelor's Peas, and it's still available on YouTube, with his brother. I can't remember his brother's name. They were the Gaunt brothers, and they were like piano sing-along guys. But he was a great entertainer. So he taught me about the music business, how to present yourself, not about drumming or music particularly.
The business, yeah.
Yes, and all that sort of thing. And he was tremendously helpful. And he was a great hustler. In fact, I think I learned a lot. I have a picture of him in the other part of my study. He's a real special gentleman. So sadly, he passed away, and I missed his funeral. I regret that profoundly.
So were these, because what I know of these shows, were they all really varied as well? So obviously I can't, was Vera Lynn doing comedy songs and stuff as well?
No, she was an absolute dream. You know, I mean, we had the 3 Degrees came to the club.
Wow.
That was surreal. That was absolutely. So I booked the band. It was a 16-piece band. And I'm not going to play drums in this. I think this is bloody rubbish, this. So the band starts, and in comes this manager, you know, big guy, big American, Afro-American guy comes in, and he says, clear the drums, clear everything. And it was rumoured he had a shooter in his pocket. I think it was a rumour, but it was still scary. So we cleared all my drums. It's a big theatre club, and they had to have all this space. Well, the band finally came. They brought all the augments, everything, and I booked the band, and they're all thinking, what a shame you're not going to be playing. Dale Gibson was on it, and Pete Lingwood was on percussion, and they were great players. They said, what a shame you're not going to be playing on it. But what had happened, their regular drummer had been on the Amber Nectar the night before and couldn't make the bloody rehearsal. So I thought, oh, great. So the MD and the manager, who had been really shirty, telling me to shift all the gear off, came up and said, could you possibly do the rehearsal? I said, yeah. Do you want me to bring my drums back? He said, very sheepishly, yes, please. So I brought my kit back on, and then the guitarist leaned over to me. He said, hey, kid, he says, just play time and things. Yeah, no problem. And the bass player says, do you read? I said, no, but I've got a good feel, I said, and all that. Well,
you winded them up, you don't even know him.
So I went and played the book. Well, I kicked ass. I really played extremely well. Now that sounds great. So then the manager comes up to me and says, this is it. He says, we could be using you on the tour next year. How many times have we heard these promises? And I thought, wow, this is it. Fame at last. Well, during my time at Bunny's Club, we had Rolf Harris, incidentally, was there, which was he was a nice man. It was a sweet man. I'm unfortunate that's what happened. But there was another band came with a fabulous drummer. I mean, and he was just starting to use a Pearl double kit, a blue one, when Pearl was really new. And he came out and played. And one of the numbers he played was "Who Shot the Sheriff?" And he played it like a funky mother. It was beautiful. Anyway, the 3 Degrees come on the tour again. They're following in. I'm thinking, I'm going to get a phone call, I didn't get the phone call. He got the phone call. But I have to say, it went to the better drummer, which was a nice story and all that kind of thing.
Who is this drummer?
I can't remember his name. It's a long time ago, but I just remember the story. Right. But he also played for Barbara Dixon as well.
So I had a couple of questions there to go back. So so were you on good money now if you're working every night this week?
Yes.
Trying to make a good living? Yeah,
good question. I was on, if you equate it to a reporter, so I was like a hack reporter, a working musician. And in the 60s, I'd be on £35 a week. But to put that in some kind of perspective, my father was a clerk of works, and he made £15 a week.
Oh, yeah, so you are on good money.
So you double your dad's wage at a time when sort of living costs are sort of respectable in certain ways. So
yes,
you in many ways, you're probably very successful.
Well, yes. I'd like.
You're working hard for it.
Oh yeah, a great bass player. What's his name? Russ. I can't remember his name. He came to me, and he dropped me off at the house, and he said, "Wow," he said, "I love your pad, man." He said, "Did you pay for that out of a tour?" I said, "Yeah, a 52-year tour." You know what I mean? I've had to work a long time to pay for that. You know what I mean? I didn't do it out a year. I mean, I have talked. I did an album once. Oh, an album launch. I didn't do the actual album. And I was talking to the bass player. We were just joking. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I did it. I got a hit." He said, "I bought my house out of it." I thought, what a lovely story. I bought my house out of it, you know.
And what kit were you using? You said to move your kit off and on. Are you still on this Premier?
No.
Oh,
No. When I got to the AC Wakefield, I gravitated to a Ludwig.
Oh.
And I did. What was it? A Ludwig New Yorker.
Okay.
A 22 by 12 bass drum.
I always wanted one of them. I wanted to try them. It's supposed to be New Yorkers famously, so you could fit them in a New York cab, right?
Cab,
supposedly, slightly narrower.
Yes, I changed that for a little Ludwig, a 12-foot, what like a jazzette thing, and what was it? An 18 by 12 bass drum.
Yeah, that's it.
And it didn't work terribly well. And then I went to Heyman, and I played Heyman. And then I had a bad car accident, and the drums got written off, and I took them down to Eddie Ryan, who rebuilt them, and they look beautiful. They were all done in a kind of burgundy finish, which was quite, I looked like a custom Heyman and all this kind of thing. And then this guy came with this champagne sparkle Ludwig, and I said, "Do you want to swap?" He said, "Yeah." So he took my Heyman. So I got my champagne sparkle Ludwig, which I played for a long time. And I made that a double kit because I had 20, 22, 12, 13, 14, 16.
Oh, and you were a double bass drum man.
Oh, absolutely. None of this double pedal.
Sparkle. What influenced that then? Is that like a Ginger Baker thing or something else? Or a jazz
Interesting question, Mark. Nice one. Joe Morello.
Thanks. Joe Morello.
Joe Morello, he didn't play a double.
No, but the colour. He had the silver sparkle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what brought the colour in and all that kind of thing. The double bass drum was because of for all the Elvis things and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I wanted to get onto that. So yeah, I mean, is it worth firing forward a bit? So you're making a living in the cabarets and various clubs. So is this what happens next?
But one of the things, what happened was, if I could just go back slightly, in 1966, I was just coming out of college, and Brian Gibson, a great player, and myself were depping in this other club, and we didn't know that the piano player was Joe Maker, who was a big MD. We didn't know that. It's just a piano player. And Brian came in and did a couple of nights, and I came in and did a couple of nights. And I promise you, Brian would have been burning. but he didn't dig his playing. I think he thought he could control me better. I was, little lad on the block. And he said, I'm going into the ace of clubs in Leeds, which is on Woodhouse. And he said, my drummer, Bill Harrison, can't start for a week. Will you come and deaf? Well, that was my introduction to the real music business, real nightclubs. And it was the most amazing experience. And John Maker mentored me a long time and enabled me to get to know people in the business and all that sort of thing. I worked at all the northern clubs, but we went to see a nightclub which was called Selby Fork. Well, it was probably the best residency around here. And there was this Steve Evans trio there with Angela Christine on guitar. He played Hammond organ. And Angela Christine played guitar. They're a great drummer. Suddenly, it wasn't a rough little trio that played standards and halfways pop. It was a class act. And Tony Harrison wanted to take over that. And I wanted to work with Tony Harrison. Eventually, I did manage to get to work with Tony Harrison. And we did a residency in Harrogate. And then we went to Bunny's Club, which was another theatre club. But I've got a lovely story there. And I was Jack the Lad at the time. So I'm walking in and there's a real slick dude dancing and he's playing what I thought was a tambourine. Well, of course, it transpires he was a brilliant pandero player. Mm. But to me, he was just playing tambourine. I thought, that's cool. And I went into the band room. Then I heard this beautiful single stroke roll played on hi-hat. I went, whoa, radar out. So I went out. And there's this gentleman sat on a silver glitter Ludwig with two toms and a bass drum. And I went, hello, he said, I'm Paul Smith. Who are you? He said, I'm Ed Thigpen.
No way. Ed Thigpen was big in Leeds.
Oh, no. This was Cleethorpes. This was in Cleethorpes.
Oh, sorry, Cleethorpes.
Yeah, but at the time, he was travelling with Sylvia, who recorded a very cheesy number called Viva España.
Okay.
But she was a session singer who recorded it. And so she brought a jazz mates with him. Well, what a privilege it was. But at that time, we had what was called Popland, which was owned by Jerry Allison. And when you worked in all the gigs, you would order the latest 3 or 4 pops each week, and they would give you could have 4 to 12 pieces. So you'd get the rhythm section and 3 front line or 4 front line or 5 front line. It would all work brilliantly. Well, of course, we had Viva España, the actual transcription. Well, of course, it blew her away when we could actually play it in the recorded key. So she thought we were quite a magical band. After that period, I kind of did a few other things, and then I was kind of treading water. I thought, I'm not going anywhere. I've got to make a move.
How old are you now at this point?
This is about 1978.
Right. all of us going maths. Don't worry about it.
1978. Eddie Peacock, fabulous Eddie, passed away sadly. I miss him to this day. I've got another picture in there, and not a day goes by do I not quote Eddie or think about Eddie. And he was Freddie Starr's MD. And a drummer, Franny Hayward, a good drummer, had just decided not to do Freddie's gig anymore because they were shadow boxing and Freddie was trying to give him one. Well, Franny turned around and cracked him one. So Freddie said, don't book him again. Because Freddie wanted to be I've got to win and all that sort of thing. So I said to Eddie, I said, can you get me the gig with Freddie? He said, I'm not getting it. No way. I said, what do you mean? Because Eddie was always bizarre. But the thing was, because it's such a surreal gig, you wouldn't get it for somebody. He said, I will speak to the manager. I will you get it yourself. He says, so that when you're in it, you don't turn around and say, look why didn't you tell me all about it? He says, I have warned you. So,
you get blamed for it.
Oh, absolutely. So but I had to do something. So I went down and did a 22-week season in Paynton. I mean, that's a season, isn't it? 22 weeks of the year.
But Lindsay's, is it?
Well, yeah, it was a big theatre. You just did a theatre show and you stayed there. But you would do 22 weeks, and you'd do 22 weeks the Sunday concerts. So Eartha Kitt would come, you know.
Sorry. So this is like another kind of big cabaret sort of thing. You're backing.
Yeah, they'd come on the Sunday and they'd do what was called Sunday concerts. So you do that.
So
and then
you did Eartha Kitt.
Oh, she was lovely. Came in with her own chaise longue. Albert Honeyman, was it Jack Honeyman was her MD, and he came into the rehearsal. He said, "Look, guys," he says, "let's get through this as quick as we could before she gets here." Well, we got to the last number and we'd read through everything, and she appeared. She said, "Like, can I try everything now?" And she did. She wanted it a bit more jazzy, and I think at the time the musicians were not as adventurous as they are today. In those days, there was a tremendous amount of work, but there wasn't the quality of musicians. Now, there's a staggering quantity of musicians, and there isn't enough work for them. It's a bizarre setup. I'm hoping at some point it will find equilibrium and balance itself out. But the time with Freddie was absolutely magical. Some horrendous stories.
I knew you'd done work with Freddie Starr. What's your knowledge of Freddie Starr, Martin?
I'm not going to mention names because I might get in trouble, and we're publishing this and there's publishing laws. But I've got a very good family friend who I've got a 1960s Hofner bass in my guitar store behind me that I got off this guy. He used to do probably the same circuit as you, playing bass, playing trumpet, doing tap dancing, doing the comedy act. He's worked with Freddie on and people like that on these summer seasons in like Blackpool and stuff. And he told me something which I can't repeat for probably legal reasons.
It's probably true.
Oh, well, yes. Good job you bring it up on an audio podcast, right?
But what I think you're kind of hearing about is a time back in the 70s or the 80s where perhaps the line in the sand was in a different place from where it is now, and people could, successful, probably married entertainers stuck out in a seaside resort somewhere might get to all kinds of troubles, is what I've heard.
I was more commenting on the music of it.
Well, if you want to talk about that, then I think he is an astonishingly good entertainer. And do you know what? Like, when I grew up in my house, we hear these stories about him from a family friend, and he'd be on TV because I was born in the early 80s. So I grew up watching him on TV. Like, he was this, and I used to find him fascinating. But then a mate of mine, you sort of forgot about him a little bit. Then a mate of mine used to go around charity shops. This is about 10 years ago. And he got a VHS, like an evening with Freddie Starr or whatever it's called. And he called me, he said, "Martin, you've got to come round and watch this." And he put it on. We ordered a pizza and had some beers. And I'm not kidding, we were on the floor in hysterics. And we're amazed at how good he was. That thing he does where he does the rewinding tape.
That's what I was going to say. That my little, I haven't looked up too much, and you was going to talk to Paul, but like my knowledge of it was that amazing backwards singing and all the choreography with it.
He had a staggering ear.
Yeah, well, you can hear him singing at the end of this VHS. I remember he does the Elvis thing, and he does this note perfect Elvis.
And that's the other thing I know about the Elvis. Yeah.
And we watched. We were laughing at his jokes, and some of it's a bit, I dare say, a little bit racist or a little bit bad. Some of the jokes.
Well, it was a time you got away with it.
Hey, I don't. But at the end of it, both me and my pal James, we were both just like, effing hell, man, he can really sing. And of course, you end up going on Wikipedia or whatever, and you're like, oh, he was in a band that was signed and he was going around.
Can I just interject there, Martin? We worked at the Cambridge Theatre in the West End.
Right.
And prior to blaspheming and using heavy expletives in comedy, it wasn't done. Working there, and there were two people heckling at, in the two seats right at the back. And he said, "Why don't you two go on each other?" And that was the first time he used the expletive F, right? Yeah. And then Richard Iles, the great trumpet player, was worked with us at the time. About a week later, he said, 27. I said, 27 what? He said, it used F. Suddenly it opened the floodgates and the expletives came in. He didn't need to do that. He didn't need that kind of language because he was funny enough. The thing was, he had a staggering ear. Now, what would happen if we rehearsed a show? I'd play the show, and he didn't like me doing all the big band figures and all that kind of thing. So I'd play it, he'd listen to it, and he'd say, "Right, get off." and he'd play the drums and he'd show me what he wanted.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, but he had a great feel, and he did. He was like one of my favourite drummers is Ringo Starr. I love his playing. It's just a great feel. Is he the fastest and loudest drummer? Probably not, but he's got that thing. And Freddie had that, and he kind of kept nudging me towards that to get away from my rather schooled approach. But the point is, you did what paid the bills. My schooled approach at that time was very good to me. It gave me a living, and I worked because of it. You know, so I got into that approach with Freddie. So Freddie was a very talented man, but he dabbled with the Elvis, so he could do excerpts with the Elvis. So I said to him, I said, Freddie, look, I said, why don't you do the Elvises perfectly? They're not hard numbers. Let's transcribe all the numbers. Let's learn all the solos. Let's do them right. And to his credit, he said yes. And he wasn't known for crossing our palm with extensive silver, just enough to, you know, keep you hanging on. Although we were on retainers. Anyway, he paid us a week to go in and rehearse. I think we did 20 Elvis numbers. And the guitarist was just as keen as I was to do exact, because we did the Las Vegas Elvis.
I was going to say, this is late Elvis, like Ronnie Tutt drumming now.
Yeah, well, it was the only one you could produce. I mean, 1966 when he did his cut, 1956 when he's doing all that, that's amazing. But you can't produce that in a nightclub because we're just getting in now to process music.
Yeah.
But the Vegas thing we can do. We started getting a big rig in, and we started. I think we started with 6 or 7 pieces, but we carried 35 musicians. You know, it was absolutely fantastic. I did a deck for Marty Kane, and I'm playing in her show. I played the show, and she loved all the concerts. Single-headed Tom was very fast, and I'd got all that. You know, thought I was Hal Blaine, you know, and all that kind of thing. And I'm going, what's happened to my playing? I'm just not on it tonight. Well, of course I'm not on it. When I'm with Freddie, I've got somebody on kettle drums banging away and clattering away behind me. And of course, I'm thinking it's me that's making all this noise. But of course, it was the great drummer and percussionist Steve Palmer who was doubling up everything that I did and all that sort of thing. But it was a very, very exciting time. And we got it absolutely brilliant. I mean, when you think about it, we did about 15 weeks at the Opera House in Blackpool, 3,500 seater, twice nightly, full every single night.
Wow.
And then we'd fly down south and do a Sunday concert down south.
When was that Freddie Starr stuff? Are we talking early 80s now?
I did. My tenure was 1978 to nearly 10 years to 10 years later, 78 to 88.
So when you were with him for all that time, then is it the case that you were working with him almost constantly,
yes,
like every week?
Yes.
So you were basically you were Freddie Starr's drummer. Were you able to take other gigs or meet up with other musicians?
I was once booked. I was doing commercials and jingles, and I was booked to do a session for Jerry Allison in Manchester. And we were doing an all-night recording with Freddie in London at Red Bus Studio. And I said, Freddie, it's 2:00. I've got to go. I've got to drive home, grab an hour, and then I'm in the studio. And he said, you can't go. I need you. I said, Freddie, I've got this musician's books. And because he could, he did. And because I had got kind of locked into that environment where I wasn't in a position to say, no, I'm going, Freddie.
Because you might have lost your seat and
I would have lost my seat, but I should have said, no, I'm going, Freddie. I should have, but I didn't. But fortunately, he was the girl singer was married to the producer of the session I was on. It was a big session at Strawberry Studio. And
was it Strawberry?
Yeah, and he stopped her going. So it kind of took a little bit of pressure off me. But the point is, he then had to get up I rang Jerry at 7 in the morning. He had to then book a drummer to go and cover for me and book a girl singer.
So Strawberry Studios, it was 10cc studio, wasn't it?
It was fantastic.
Yeah, which is amazing.
And Pluto was above it. That was an 8-track above it and a 16-track downstairs. And it was fabulous recording there, really.
I've heard so many stories from other people about that. It was one of the only decent, if you like, independent studios that people used to go there and do sessions and stuff.
Well, I did loads and loads of jingles. At one particular point, I was on BBC doing a special. I was on ITV doing a special, and I was on 3 adverts. Just one Christmas, you couldn't get away from me and all that.
Oh, that's amazing. So you watched TV at Christmas, and
my 15-minute bit of fame and all that.
You're like, sort of shush, everybody! It's my drums again.
Yeah, and all that kind of.
Listen to that hi-hat sound.
Absolutely. But the thing was, at that time, I played a Beverly kit, which was a 12, 14, 18, and whatever the side drum was, probably a Ludwig 400. And the 18-inch bass drum was very Purdy-esque, and they really loved the bass drum sound that it produced.
So this isn't with Freddie now. This is for the sessions, you mean?
Yeah, for the jingles, I was doing commercials. Bring the 18-inch bass. It was, bring the 18-inch bass drum, and that's what they wanted, and it made the kind of sound that they wanted, and all that kind of thing. But Freddie had that power, that kind of power over you. But the point is, he also had that ability to bring all this together and make a fantastic show. So we would go and we would do an hour-and-a-half show twice nightly. Well, we'd do a 3-hour show twice nightly. And he'd do the first part, he would do his comedy. Then he would go into very, very serious Elvis, and we opened up with Zarathustra, and we did all that. And it was hard work. You knew you kind of had a workout when you finished the gig.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I bet that just built up some stamina to do that.
It also makes you a noisy beggar, because when you work with normal people, you're too bloody loud. People say, just down a bit. You don't have to be there. We're only here.
You must have.
Sorry, I know Jack's got like loads of things to talk about and move on. But just before I'd kill myself if I didn't just ask you one question about Freddie Starr before I move on, which is that he is obviously a very complex character. You obviously are very close to him. Is there anything you cannot, maybe you can't say, but is there anything you can say about what it was like to work with him as a person? Was he encouraging, or was he kind of hard to be around? Was he quite up or quite down? Because I get the impression that sometimes he was quite all over the place. Or was he quite a steady kind of character?
He never drank.
Right. Okay.
He never, ever drank. I saw him hold a glass of wine once. I saw him hold, and in all seriousness, and Ted said he saw him sip a half a lager. Didn't drink it, he sipped. Whether he was trying to appear to be drinking, he never did. So when you were in his company, if you'd had a couple of amber nectars, or whatever, you tended to lose tongue, and he would take it all down. But he did take up, down as level, sideways, and all sorts of things, which did play with him at his head a little bit. But the thing was, he was a complex character because he had to go on stage almost angry by him. And he had to go on stage and be very aggressive. And if he went on stage and it was all happy families, he wasn't funny. So he had to be nasty. And he brought this side out of him, but he also brought this extreme humor. I did a lot of televisions with him. Right. Because him and his minder once went in a shop, and neither of them could spell 11. So they had to pay cash. He wasn't great at learning scripts and things.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There was. We worked with Jim Davison a lot, and the two of them were not the most well-read people. They weren't gifted. When you watch a comedy actor who can learn a script, well, Freddie couldn't, but Freddie could create brilliant humour that the comedy actors were not gifted in. It wasn't their forte. So he was probably one of the funniest men in the country, bar none. He copied Norman Wisdom. That's one act I never worked for. I wish I had. But again, Freddie could mimic him. He would watch him, and he would take his ideas.
You see a lot of Norman Wisdom in it, even though he kind of, I think Freddie Starr does much more of like a man at the edge of a breakdown kind of style of thing.
Yes,
right?
yes.
But it's the same kind of slapstick kind of thing.
But normal wisdom would produce his act. Freddie would create an act from nothing, you know, and another one the night. We never did the same show 2 nights running.
That's what I was. Oh, that's interesting. So
Never.
You must have had, you know, obviously like points in the show where certain things happen, but he would go off on different things every time.
Oh, ridiculously. But there was there was about 5 of us that were his main cornermen that he booked all the time, and we had cues, and it was great because he wouldn't want countings. We did the Elvis, the big Elvis recording, and he said, "I don't want using any music." Oh, I thought, God. So we had 26 Elvis tracks with a big orchestra with all the figures and everything, and they were changing right, left, and all over the place. Well, if you ever go watch that, the tribute to Elvis, and there's a close-up of me where you come onto my kit, you'll find bits of paper stuck all over the place. I had to do it because they were making changes, and I had some bloody big cues to. And when you hit it, you got to hit it loud and hope that you're right. So I'd have things. So fortunately, Freddie didn't clock that.
I was about to say it's interesting from what we've learned about you so far that you kind of like the variety and the change in what you're doing, but you've stayed with this artist pretty much constantly for 10 years. So you must have liked it.
Yes, but the point is, it was during a time when we had a big depression in the country, and it was working out where to go. And you were always hoping that you would go on to the next level. Now, I didn't go on to the next level.
You're pretty high, Paul. That's a pretty high level.
But
didn't you? I don't know if we didn't talk about it, but you travelled the world as well with him, didn't you? It wasn't just Britain.
Oh, yes, but I was hoping that something else would happen, and it didn't.
What else were you hoping? What? So you're doing 7,000 seats a night in a theatre, which is amazing. But yeah. What's the next level for you then? Would it be backing like a bigger name or something?
No, I think I wanted to become a better player.
Right.
I'd become the best Freddie Starr drummer. And there's only one Freddie Starr, so you can only do one gig. And we once played, Ted and I were doing a charity as a favour, and we were playing with this Elvis impressionist, and he said, well, I normally use tapes, but today I'm going to try it with live backing. Well, we started. Well, he thought he'd died and gone to heaven, that we've got all Elvis's band there and everything. But it was a great experience, but I wanted to very much improve my playing. We went to Las Vegas, and that was like the big gig for me, and this was absolutely fantastic.
Where in Las Vegas? Do you remember where you played?
Oh, I do. The Hilton.
Whoa.
Yeah, the Hilton.
Las
Let
Vegas.
me tell you. Buddy Richie's lead trumpet. What a great band. We're supporting Engelbert Humperdinck.
Wow.
Fantastic gig and all that kind of thing. And we're there for 3 weeks. We got picked up in these limousines with televisions in it. Everybody got picked up with a limousine, but we didn't know that when it came. We just thought it was us that was being picked up in limousines. And we stayed there, and it was an absolutely tremendous experience. But also, you meet some fabulous players. But anyway, I'd been there about 2.5 weeks, and I had my midlife crisis. Now, everybody's allowed this, and I was 37, and I rang my dear wife, who is the most amazing wife you can get. It's the best model wife there is. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do it anymore. And her, being very sensible, said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, if I'm very, very, very lucky, I'm going to go sideways, but I'll probably go backwards. She said, why? I said, I want to do it. And I didn't. I'd come to that 10 years. I'd had that time.
Why? Did you feel because you hadn't progressed like you wanted to? You were stuck in a rut, isn't the word, but you know what I mean?
No, it is. It is stuck in a rut. And all of a sudden, it becomes clear, it comes in focus. The day before, you were in the same rut, but it was out of focus. So it didn't touch you.
And that was in Las Vegas, coming towards the end of a run. You thought, I've probably peaked with the Freddie thing, or you know, or is it that, you know, you were maybe seeing players in some of the other bands in Las Vegas and thinking, well, they're doing something at a different level, and you could see that gap. Yeah,
there was a great drummer, Bonnie Bonaparte, was playing with this Earth, Wind and Fire band, and he's playing killer drums.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, who's singing the falsetto and doing all the hype? It was him. It was amazing, and he's kicking everything. And him and I hung together. He was beautiful. It was a lovely meeting of minds. But I went down to see the manager, Leon Fisk, who used to work with the Dallas Boys. And I said to Leon, "Oh, right, gangster, yeah, right, I'm Leon Fisk, all right." I said, "Leon, need to talk to you." I said, "Serious?" He said, "Okay." So he dropped the manager. It was like man to man for a period. I said, "I'm throwing in the towel." And he was very perceptive. He kind of thought, now's the time. And he said, "Okay." And he said, "Fine." And I said, and I mean it.
He didn't try to convince you not to.
No, because he knew.
He knew. He could see it in your
tough
eyes.
guy because he's Freddie's manager and he's got a bit peer. Don't give Freddie any crap. I'll deal with all this kind of, that kind of. And he was great. And he covered my butt because I thought it'd take him ages to replace me. It did. 3 bloody weeks. I expected it to be 3 months, but 3 weeks and I had somebody in place and rehearsed and all that. I think I could probably have stayed during that 3-week tenure if I said, "No, I want to stay." But I'd done that once before and I thought, "No, I'm going." And then I decided, this is delightful, is this? I was going to be a probation officer or a social worker.
Oh, wow. You wanted to leave music completely?
Yeah. Don't ask me why I picked probation officer or social worker. I haven't a clue.
You wanted to become a productive member of society finally.
I think so.
And not just a musician.
So there we are. That's the end of part 1 of our interview with Paul Smith. So I hope you enjoyed that. Come back for the next episode where he goes into a bit more detail about what he did after he finished with Freddie Starr, including going back to studying where he worked with legendary teachers like John Riley, Jim Chapin, Joe Morello, Mel Lewis, Billy Drummond. So he dropped some real good pearls of wisdom on that. So hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Washboard Resonators Present.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate and leave a comment.
And to support our band, please sign up to the mailing list. You'll find the link in the show notes and on the website.